the combination of life circumstances, whether you're like, you have the flu, you can't really pray well, the places where you go to pray, or in your own interior life, it feels like Jesus is far away. These are all participations in this mystery. And Father Luke, what are we supposed to do when we feel this Jesus is missing? Hi everybody, welcome back to Franciscan Fridays at the Shrine. My name is Brother Pius Gagné.
I'm Father Luke Mary Fletcher.
And we're here at the Shrine. Again, just a reminder, when you're watching our podcast, to please like, subscribe, comment, tell your friends, make a donation to the Shrine to support our work. Everything we do is by donation, so we would invite your support. Father Luke.
Brother Pius.
What is our topic today?
Today we're going to talk about the fifth joyful mystery of the Rosary, the finding of the child Jesus in the temple.
Beautiful.
To begin off, something really kind of funny. So we have this Rosary garden here at Our Lady Shrine. So we're at the National Blue Army Shrine of Our Lady of Fatima, dedicated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. That's Warren County, New Jersey, right? A little piece of Portugal, a little Fatima in America here. And we have this Rosary garden. As the Rosary is near and dear, what Mother Mary said at Fatima, she called herself the Lady of the Rosary. And it's the one message that was consistent through all 6 of the apparitions was pray the Rosary every day. So the founders of the shrine here did build this Rosary garden. And so it begins with the joyful mysteries. And as you kind of go, it's like a walkway through the woods. And then, every so many feet, there's another one of the mysteries of the Rosary. I thought it would have been funny if you got to the 4th joyful mystery, which is the presentation of the child Jesus in the temple. And then the path just goes into the woods. And you were just like lost wandering in the jungle, like just as Mother Mary and Saint Joseph spent 3 days frantically searching for the child Jesus. This is the sorrowful part of this joyful mystery. The joy is when they finally find him in the temple. But I thought it would have been funny if we had just had this random like lost in the woods thing that you go through and you're like panicked because there's like New Jersey black bears and you're you don't know where you are. Obviously, we're in the woods, so a lot of times the cell phones don't work out here. And so you can't use your GPS, and you're just like panicked and lost and crying out to God. And then eventually you round like a corner, and then there's the 5th joyful mystery. There's 12-year-old Jesus and Mary and Joseph, and anyways, welcome to my brain.
Yeah. Father Luke the prankster.
But in reality, it's right there.
It's
so
right there.
You don't get lost.
Don't
But the experience of Mary and Joseph having lost the child Jesus, and then the joy of finding him in the temple, and then that exchange, we've been looking, why did you do this to us? So, and then the Lord's answered, why were you searching for me? Did you not know? I would be in my Father's house, being about my Father's business, being God the Father. And then yet he does go back to Nazareth with them. He goes, is obedient and is growing in grace, salvation, and wisdom.
Yep. Yeah, it seems to me that this mystery teaches us so much. A shout out to Father Andrew, who was, in many, many ways, instrumental to our relationship with the Blue Army.
Father Andrew Apostolate, one of the founders of our community, but who's now deceased.
That's right. Every time I pray this mystery, I think of the class he taught us on the stages of the spiritual life. And he talked about the suffering of the loss of Jesus, right? And he talked about how, this is maybe a podcast for another day, but the stages of the spiritual life and how there's a way in which in our spiritual lives, there are these sort of variations where we feel that God is very, very close to us, where prayer is an enjoyable experience. We go, and even without even trying, like we feel God present with us, maybe even throughout our day. You sit down to pray your rosary, and you have these beautiful meditations. You feel so close to God. You're so consoled. It's so wonderful, right? And then, 3 days later, you're in the chapel, and you're like, man, my holy hour must be over. And you look at your watch, and you're like, oh no, it's only been 5 minutes. You start going to the old sources for the things that console you. Maybe you grab your favorite spiritual book, and you're like, oh, this isn't doing anything. You grab scripture and you're like, why do I constantly turn to the book of Maccabees? This is ridiculous. It's...
I can't relate to what you're talking about.
Oh, fair enough. That's right. I forgot. You're in the seventh dimension.
Tell us more. Tell me more.
These ways in which kind of like the ordinary ways where we feel like we find Jesus feel closed off to us. The ways of praying. We go to Mass and, not everybody is blessed to have a parish where the priest is necessarily the greatest preacher. Some priests struggle, or the priest may be a great preacher, the music ministry, the only person they could find is somebody who is doing their best, their heart's in it, right? But you go to Mass and you're like, oh my gosh. Or you're there, and not that this ever happens at the shrine, but there are children who sound like pterodactyls, screaming throughout the entire Mass. And especially for those of you who are parents of those pterodactyl children, who like all you want, my poor sister, she's got 6 children, right? And we've had these conversations, and she's like, I would love to just be able to like make it through the entire Mass, hear all the readings, and hear the homily, because like she's constantly chasing or changing a diaper or whatever's happening. The combination of life circumstances, whether you're like, you have the flu, you can't really pray well, the places where you go to pray, or in your own interior life, it feels like Jesus is far away. These are all participations in this mystery.
Right.
And Father Luke, what are we supposed to do when we feel this Jesus is missing?
Wow. Okay, you're going to like throw it to me with that question. Oh my goodness. So many things can be said, huh? Can I add something to the list that you just gave?
Of course.
Also, any one of us could have a day when we weren't our best self.
Yeah.
We fall into sins of different types. And in that way, we're somewhat losing Jesus as well.
Yeah.
Not that he ever walks away from us, but we walk away from him.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can feel really down on yourself or frustrated or whatever it might be. But what can we do? Well, obviously, anything that helps us to persevere. And all the great spiritual masters, the great saints who would write about the spiritual life, even in some of the parables of Jesus, there's always an exhortation to perseverance, to not giving up. Maybe to pray not as you wish you could, but just to pray as you can. Even St. Therese of Lisieux, the doctor of the church, she has a line in her autobiography, if I have nothing, which is this incredible desolation, like I have nothing, Jesus, I give you my nothing.
Yeah.
It's almost like, wow, how do you acquire a disposition to be like that? I think certainly also being open to receiving help, which I think a lot of us, we don't like to be on the receiving end of help in different ways, whether that be vulnerability or just being open to letting other people help us in any way. That could be medical profession, that could be counseling, that could be a friend who helps babysit. I don't know, like whatever the situation might be, but enough humility and vulnerability to be open to letting others help. Like I know I would much rather prefer to help other people than to be helped. I don't know if that's like a guy thing or whatever. But certainly anything that can help us to persevere and to not throw in the towel, not to give up.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think the spirituality of detachment that you'll also see in some of the writings of the saints, that whether I'm really enjoying my prayer or I'm not, part of me is like okay with either. I just want to love God, not the... Well, St. John of the Cross would say, don't seek the consolations of God, but rather seek the God of consolations.
Yeah.
Or maybe in modern language, like, do you want God or do you just want the candy he gives you?
Yeah.
Or St. Teresa of Avila, the great Carmelite mystic and doctor of the church, when you really want to pray and it's wonderful and you pray, that's God's gift to you. And when you just don't feel like praying at all, but you still pray, that's your gift to God.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another important piece to that is just realizing, like, even as you said, even if you sin, God's not abandoning you, right? Like, God is the good shepherd. And the Lord tells us in so many parables, like, however far you stray, all you have to do is turn around, that metanoia, right? Just turn back your heart to Jesus a little bit, and he's right there. You may not feel him, you may not see him, but he's there. And I think I've had so many conversations with people who are experiencing this desolation, this feeling of absence of Jesus. And they're like, well, what am I doing wrong? And that's not a bad question, right? Ignatius of Loyola in his Rules for Discernment talks about like, sometimes we experience desolation because we've sinned or because we weren't so faithful to the graces God was giving us, right? Like we get an inspiration to pray and instead we scroll on YouTube. Don't scroll on YouTube and watch this instead of going to pray.
That's ironic.
Right?
Okay, go ahead.
There could be all sorts of reasons. Could be physical, right? Or, Ignatius says, sometimes God allows desolation to see what kind of lovers we are of him.
Right.
Are we there, as you said, Father Luke, for like the consolations, the candy, the good feelings?
Right.
Or are we there because we're trying to show our love to God? And I think, I don't know who said it, I've heard you quote it in a homily a couple of times. Mary's immaculate heart was God's gift to her.
Right.
And her sorrowful heart was her gift back to God.
Right. The mystic Berthe Petit.
There you go.
Yeah.
And, this is one of the 7 sorrows of Our Lady, that she feels this absence, this loss of Jesus. And, think about looking for your kid. You're a day's journey out from Jerusalem. You turn back around. So literally one of those days, you don't even know he's missing. You go back, you're searching, you're asking everybody. So they're getting help. And then they show up in the temple and he's there and they don't get it. And I think it's important that Mary's question of Jesus is something we can ask him.
Right.
Lord, I don't understand why this is happening. Help me understand if there's a way that I've not been faithful. What can I be doing better? But then also to have that trust, that surrender, to say to the Lord, I'm doing the best I can. I think, I'll quote a New York Yankee, even though I'm a Red Sox fan, right?
Wow. Okay. Are we getting this on tape? Okay.
It's on tape. It's on tape.
All right.
Yogi Berra, right? 90% of the game is just showing up.
Right.
Right. And I think, I also think of Raniero Cantalamessa, the former papal preacher. He came to speak to our community once, and one of the few things I remember about an answer he gave to one of the brothers' questions, he said, sometimes all you have is the obedience of your body sitting in the chair in the chapel.
Right.
Right? That fidelity, day in and day out, pays massive dividends on the end. And the displeasure, St. Therese says, bearing even the displeasing, being displeasing to ourselves. Just offering to God the little that we have and trusting that because he's good, because he loves us, even the desolation can work for our good.
That's beautiful. And it isn't an interesting note that the church does teach that even the Virgin Mary, as holy and sinless as she was by God's grace, had to grow in her faith journey. So just to conclude with 2 thoughts, and these thoughts by no means am I suggesting that Mary and Joseph committed a sin or did something wrong, in this mystery of the Rosary. I'm not saying that. But first thought would be, had they gone to the temple first, the presence of God at that time. So going to the temple, going to the presence of the Lord is always the right thing to do. They should have maybe gone there first. And then the other thing, in the sense of, I wondered if later in life, if Mother Mary, when she was praying with the book Song of Songs, that Old Testament book, which is this love poetry between the husband and wife, the groom and the bride, and there's a game of hide and seek that happens.
Yeah.
And then, so in this life, because we're made for the beatific vision, but we don't have it yet, in our spiritual life, there is this searching and looking and longing, and where is my beloved? And in that Song of Songs, which is kind of this beautiful mystical treatise, that you find the lover and the beloved, and then boom, they're gone again. Where did they go? And in this life, that is our experience. We have these moments of tremendous intimacy and closeness and consolation and beauty, and then other moments like, where'd you go? And so I wonder if certainly Mother Mary would have known that book and praying over it. Psalm 123 says to always keep your eyes on the Lord, like a mistress on her, the servant on the master. If you would just constantly keeping the eyes on Jesus, and there would never be a moment where you'd be like, where did he go? Because you're just so tracking him, so focused on him. So, to acquire some sort of an interior disposition, practicing the presence of God. And of course, we'll never have that perfectly in this life.
Yeah.
But maybe a beautiful thing to pray with, or a grace to ask for with this mystery, the fifth joyful mystery, the finding in the temple.
Yeah, one last thought that I'll throw out there is that we walk by faith, not by feelings. And as St. Paul says, we walk by faith and not by sight. But I think it's important to talk about our feelings, right? Like God is not more present or less present because we feel him more or less, right?
That's gold.
And,
gold, yes.
And I think the beauty that we have as Catholics is we have the objective promise of God that he's always present in the Blessed Sacrament. He's always present in all the sacraments. We have an objective, not reliant on our feelings at all. We know Jesus is present in the Blessed Sacrament. So we can always go to the temple. In our day, the place where the presence of God is our churches in the Eucharist, and we can be certain that he's there. And I think that that's just such a beautiful way to imitate Our Lady and St. Joseph in this mystery.
Excellent, bro. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So we want to thank all of you for watching. Please subscribe and like, drop us some comments, give us ideas for future topics. And if you wouldn't mind making a little donation to Our Lady Shrine, so it's bluearmyshrine.com.